Hey, welcome back. A course in death, dying, and bereavement would be so incomplete unless there was a section that addressed, at least in part, on the aspect of beyond death, an afterlife, and near-death experiences. And this short review of that topic supplements the reading in our textbook. And speaking of our textbook, our author, Len Dispelder, had a great quote in that chapter, which she says, "The notion that life continues in some form after death is one of the oldest concepts held by human beings." And as you'll see, that is certainly the case. Beliefs about life after death occupy a broad spectrum with so many variables, so many different beliefs, cultures, and customs. And interestingly, by far, there's almost always a common theme of death is but a transition, and the soul or the self lives on. Even in ancient Egypt, there was the focus on preparing for the afterlife during life. According to the ancient Egyptians, the body was mortal, but it also contained immortal elements. Ancient Egyptians believed that every person has three souls, the Ka, the Ba, and the Ak. Ka represented a person's creative and sustaining power of life, and at death, it was the Ka that flew to the afterlife, as you can see in this hieroglyph here. The classical Greek concept of immortality included where Pythagoras taught that conduct during life determined the destiny of the soul after life. And Plato emphasized dualism, and that the soul is eternal and released from the body at death. Personal immortality was only important as it affected the survival of the community at large. But a person could achieve social immortality by being a good citizen. And in classical ancient Greece, life and death were viewed as aspects of an ever-changing of eternal flux. And our philosophy of life influences all our philosophy of death as well. And as Socrates stated, the unexamined life is not worth living, meaning that our inquiries have to at some point push back the limitations of our own experience, ideology, and expectations. And then toward that end, it begins the process of reckoning with the meaning of mortality in general, and of our own timelined existence specifically, and to ponder the many what-ifs. There's 4 traditional concepts of an afterlife that transcend time, demographies, ethnicity, culture, and they are the concept of a rebirth. And rebirth has been characterized as probably the most persistent image of afterlife in the history of all religion. 2, life continues in some form after death, a very traditional concept for an afterlife. Thirdly, there's some kind of judgment that determines eternal destiny of reward or punishment. And lastly, some reference to guardianship of ancient ancestor gods is an important event for the soul's journey into an afterlife. The consolations of religion, for many, offers pathways toward understanding, coping, and finding meaning to their loss. And religion can play a significant role in the attitudes and behaviors toward death, offering solace and rituals. Religious institutions also can connect people to God and to each other during their time of grief. Spirituality, a search for ultimate meaning and purpose in life, may or may not be directly related to a particular religious tradition, but it can assist with the personal search for a connection. There's major religions that speak about heaven and an afterlife in some fashion, not all the same, but certainly reference it in some fashion in their sacred texts, starting with Buddhism. And Buddhists believe that achieving rebirth in wonderlands are like way stations toward nirvana, which is the ultimate cessation of ego and desire. And with the cessation of ego and desire, the person just moves into bliss. There's Hinduism, where the great Hindu god Vishnu, who reposes far above the highest heavens in Vaikuntha, a gathering place for those who have achieved moksha. It's a transcendent state attained as a result of being released from the cycle of rebirth that's impelled by the law of karma. Thirdly is Islam. Muslims believe the dead must await the day of resurrection to receive judgment. But Islam also provides many details about the rewards and pleasures awaiting the souls who are ushered into heaven. And Zoroastrianism is a pre-Islamic religion of ancient Persia, pretty much the basis for the three major religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The religion inspired those Abrahamic religions and included the dichotomy of heaven and hell. After death, souls must try to cross a bridge, and the blessed will ease over into heaven, and the damned will go elsewhere. Judaism, while the Torah says very little about heaven, the mystical writings on Kabbalah divide the cosmos into several spheres and layers. The highest of these realms is Azilut, from which the pure deity emanates. And then there's Taoism, Confucianism, which says that Tian, the celestial aspect of the cosmos, is often translated as heaven. What happens after death is described variously as transformation, immortality, or ascension into heaven. And then finally, Christianity, where behind the Christian ideas about heaven and hell lies the more basic belief that our lives extend beyond the grave into an afterlife. And in the Christian tradition, Jesus is the means of return back to God and to God's dwelling, which is paradise. And Jesus' resurrection is seen as the promise of what is possible for all humans, resurrection to an eternal life with God. The secular concepts of immortality, as some of you may recall, secularization is really the process in modern societies whereby religious ideas, practice, and organizations lose their influence in the face of scientific and other logical, rational knowledge. The emphasis is on rationalism and the scientific method. Generally, there's three examples to highlight secular alternatives to religious orientations, and they include humanism, which attaches a prime importance to the human rather than on divine or supernatural matters. And a humanist believes that will stress the potential value and goodness of human beings and on rational, logical problem solving. Positivism, similarly, holds that every rationally justifiable assertion can be scientifically verified or is capable of logical or mathematical proof. And then lastly, existentialism, the third example of secular alternatives, emphasizes the existence of the individual person as a free and responsible agent determining their own development through acts of the will. And then we come to near-death experiences, or NDEs. These are stories of travel to other worlds found in virtually every culture throughout time and memoriam. They're profound psychological and emotional events with transcendental and mystical elements. NDEs typically occur when a person is close to death or in intense danger where death is imminent. A couple of scientists that have formally studied NDEs include Albert Heim, Raymond Moody, Sam Parnia, Bruce Grayson, and others looked into and published pretty widely their findings about what they see as the scientific aspects of the NDE. And then there's a composite picture when interviewing thousands of people who reported having an NDE. We see some common themes. One, that the person indicates there was the recognition that the threat of death was imminent. There was a dreamlike yet also seemingly real state during their NDE. There was a heightened sensory perception, feeling, seeing, hearing, taste. All the sensory perceptions were heightened. There was a separation from the body, for sure. There was an overall pervasive sense of calm and peace. Constraints of time and space were irrelevant. In fact, the time-space continuum, as the person knew it, was really pretty much collapsed. They talk about entering a transitional stage of their life, kind of a journey, moving into the darkness, through through the tunnel, but noticing a beckoning, brilliant light at the end. There were instantaneous flashbacks and full or partial life reviews during that experience. And then lastly, lots of reports glimpsing of a world with unimaginable and unspeakable brilliance and beauty. In the dimensions of NDEs, that the person will emerge from that experience with a greater appreciation of life, a more discerning capability of really re-examining what's most important, a reduction in death anxiety, and really altered their goals and their values in their life. There's this concept of a panoramic memory that Raymond Moody talks about, which is a life review and includes vivid visions of a whole life or selected highlights of it. There's an encounter with the present, seeing deceased relatives or friends, or perhaps even sensing a religious figure nearby. Sometimes all those who have reported an NDE, would be all of the time, they were told it wasn't their time yet. They needed to return to Earth to attend to unfinished business. And lastly, majority of NDEs are characterized by joy, peace, cosmic unity at oneness, but some may be distressing and frightening. So there's a lot of theories, probably 12 different theories on interpreting NDEs, but the 4 big ones are these. The dying brain theory, which says there's the shutdown of essential neurotransmitters that creates the illusion of beauty, particularly endorphins and serotonin. There's the hallucination theory, where they're able to replicate in controlled settings during research aspects of an NDE by using a ketamine-like substance. But the explanation for this theory is that the process of dying results in the body's hypersecretion of endorphins in a ketamine-like substance. Ketamine is a veterinary medicine used in anesthesia with larger animals, but it's called a dissociative anesthetic. Dissociative meaning that it creates a sense that your body is separate from your soul. They're no longer associated together. Then there's the temporal lobe theory, which says that some of the features of NDE occur in a type of epilepsy associated with damage to the brain's temporal lobes, which are on the sides of your head. The stress of near death may cause stimulation of this brain area. Electrically stimulating this area in research under controlled setting can actually mimic a few elements of an NDE. And then fourthly, the lack of oxygen theory, which is really unsupported by research because the theory goes that when you're dying, you're not breathing, you stop breathing, or you're breathing very slowly. And so there's deoxygenation into the brain, and the brain starts to atrophy, creating all these visions. The problem with that theory, and that it's unsupported, is that NDEs appear to occur at the moment when the threat of death occurs, not necessarily at the time of death, which might be hours later, when death is close enough to be starving the brain of oxygen. So NDEs, the person is still breathing. And then Sam Parney, we don't have time for this, but this is a really great short interview of Sam Parney, the pulmonary and critical care doctor at New York University Langone Medical Center, really is looking at pretty provocative evidence that consciousness continues after clinical death. And so Google this guy, or YouTube this guy, Is Life After Death Possible? Sam Parney. It's fascinating. So beliefs about death, simply just the end? Oh well, you were here, now you're not. Perhaps a new beginning? A continued journey? Well, dying is more than just a biological occurrence. It's also a human, social, and spiritual event. One thing, though, is abundantly clear. Near-death experiences are pivotal events in people's lives. It's a catalyst for growth on many levels. And I'll give Shakespeare the final word, is that we don't understand NDEs yet, but we know that there are more things in heaven on earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies.